Every cell in your body is listening to what you eat, not in a mystical way, but in a biochemical one. Food is not just calories moving through a digestive tube, it is information. It tells your mitochondria when to burn, your immune system when to attack, and your damaged cells when to repair or self-destruct. When we understand this, nutrition stops being about restriction and starts becoming a quiet, disciplined conversation with biology itself, one that can tilt the internal environment away from chronic inflammation, uncontrolled growth, and metabolic stagnation, and toward resilience, efficiency, and renewal. Asterisk, this speech is for educational purposes only and does not diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Cancer and metabolic disorders are complex medical conditions that require professional medical care. Nutritional strategies can support overall health and biological resilience, but they should never replace guidance from qualified healthcare providers or prescribed treatments. When we speak about metabolic timing, we are really speaking about remembering how the human body evolved to heal itself in the spaces between eating, because for most of our biological history, food was not constant, and the body learned to use absence as a signal rather than a threat. Every time we eat, insulin rises, growth pathways turn on, and cells are told to build, store, and divide, which is useful for survival but dangerous when it becomes nonstop. When eating is continuous, the body never receives permission to pause, clean, and repair, and over time damaged proteins, dysfunctional mitochondria, and abnormal cells accumulate quietly beneath the surface. Structured gaps between meals create a different internal message, one that says energy is limited, efficiency matters, and waste must be recycled. This is where autophagy becomes active, a deeply intelligent process in which cells dismantle their own broken parts and reuse the raw materials to build stronger structures. Healthy cells adapt to this temporary scarcity by becoming more efficient, while metabolically inflexible or abnormal cells struggle because they depend heavily on constant glucose and growth signals to survive. This contrast is not aggressive, but selective, favoring resilience over excess. As insulin levels fall during these fasting windows, fat stores become accessible, inflammation begins to quiet, and the hormonal environment shifts away from storage and toward utilization. The body starts burning what it has already stored rather than demanding more input from the outside world. At the immune level, periods without food improve immune cell renewal and sensitivity, enhancing the ability to recognize and clear damaged or precancerous cells before they gain momentum. Importantly, this is not about starvation or deprivation, but about rhythm, about giving the body predictable windows of rest from digestion so it can redirect energy toward maintenance. Even modest extensions between meals can restore metabolic flexibility, allowing cells to switch smoothly between glucose and fat as fuel, a hallmark of metabolic health. Over time, this flexibility reduces oxidative stress, improves mitochondrial efficiency, and lowers the background noise of chronic inflammation that drives both fat accumulation and cellular dysfunction. Psychologically, metabolic timing also retrains appetite signaling, helping hunger hormones reset, so eating becomes responsive rather than compulsive. The body relearns trust in its internal energy reserves, reducing fear-driven overeating and stabilizing blood sugar patterns. This way, the absence of food becomes an active participant in healing rather than a passive void. The silence between meals becomes biologically productive, space where repair is prioritized over growth, clarity over clutter, and order over chaos, allowing the body to quietly recalibrate itself toward balance, efficiency, and long-term resilience. Asterisk, when we prioritize fiber-rich plant foods over refined carbohydrates, we are not simply choosing slower digestion. We're choosing to communicate with an entire ecosystem living inside us that quietly shapes our metabolism, immunity, and long-term resilience. Fiber is not digested by human enzymes, which is precisely why it matters, because it reaches the colon intact and becomes nourishment for beneficial guts, bacteria that have co-evolved with us as metabolic partners. When these microbes ferment soluble fibers from vegetables, legumes, seeds, and certain fruits, They produce short-chain fatty acids such as butyrate, acetate, and propionate, compounds that act as signaling molecules rather than simple energy sources. These molecules calm inflammatory pathways, strengthen the gut barrier, and influence how immune cells distinguish between healthy tissue and potential threats. In contrast, refined carbohydrates are absorbed rapidly in the upper intestine, causing sharp spikes in blood sugar and insulin, while offering nothing to the microbial community downstream. Over time, this pattern starves beneficial bacteria and allows less favorable strains to dominate, increasing intestinal permeability and systemic inflammation. Chronic inflammation creates a biochemical background that encourages fat storage and weakens immune surveillance, making it easier for abnormal cells to escape detection. A fiber-rich diet reverses this trend gradually but profoundly, as the gut ecosystem becomes more diverse and stable. Inflammatory signals decrease and insulin sensitivity improves, allowing glucose to move into cells efficiently rather than circulating in excess. This stability reduces the hormonal pressure to store fat and dampens growth signals that can drive uncontrolled cellular behavior. Fiber also physically slows digestion, extending satiety and preventing the rapid glucose fluctuations that exhaust the pancreas and disrupt appetite regulation. At the level of gene expression, short-chain fatty acids interact with cellular receptors that influence fat oxidation, mitochondrial function, and even program cell death in damaged cells. Rather than attacking disease directly, fiber creates conditions in which healthy regulation becomes the default state. The immune system benefits as well, because a well-fed microbiome trains immune cells to respond with precision instead of chronic overreaction, reducing collateral damage to healthy tissue. This precision is essential in preventing the kind of low-grade immune dysfunction that allows metabolic disease and abnormal cell growth to progress unnoticed. There is also a quiet psychological shift that occurs when fiber becomes central to eating patterns. Meals become more grounded, digestion more predictable, and hunger signals more honest, reducing the urge to chase quick energy through sugar and refined starches. Over time, the body begins to associate nourishment with stability rather than spikes, and this steadiness ripples through hormonal rhythms, sleep quality, and energy levels. In this way, fiber is not a passive dietary component, but an active architect of the internal environment, shaping microbial alliances that protect against inflammation, metabolic chaos, and cellular dysfunction by turning the gut into a center of regulation rather than disruption. When healthy fats become a central part of nutrition, the body shifts from a cycle of constant glucose dependence into a more stable and efficient metabolic state that mirrors how human physiology was designed to function. Unlike refined carbohydrates that flood the bloodstream quickly and demand immediate insulin response, fats are absorbed slowly and provide sustained energy, reducing the hormonal volatility that drives fat storage and metabolic stress. At the cellular level, fats are not merely fuel. They are structural components of cell membranes, influencing how signals are received, interpreted, and acted upon. The types of fats consumed determine membrane fluidity and receptor behavior, subtly shaping inflammation, insulin sensitivity, and immune responsiveness. Fats from olives, avocados, nuts, seeds, and fatty fish introduce monosaturated and omega-3 fatty acids that dampen inflammatory signaling pathways and improve mitochondrial efficiency. This matters because chronic inflammation is a common thread linking metabolic dysfunction, accelerated aging, and the internal environments that allow abnormal cells to thrive. As inflammation quiets, insulin signaling becomes more precise, allowing cells to access glucose when needed without constant elevation of insulin levels. Lower insulin reduces the pressure to store energy as fat and opens the door to increased fat oxidation, particularly when combined with metabolic timing that includes periods of low insulin exposure. Healthy fats also influence satiety hormones, such as leptin and cholecystokin, helping the brain recognize fullness and reducing compulsive eating driven by blood sugar swings. Over time, this hormonal recalibration supports gradual fat loss, without triggering the stress responses associated with chronic calorie restriction. At the level of cellular signaling, omega-3 fatty acids modulate gene expression involved in cell cycle regulation and apoptosis, encouraging damaged or dysfunctional cells to follow orderly self-destruction rather than unchecked survival. This is not an aggressive intervention, but a normalization of biological rules that healthy cells already obey. Mitochondria, the energy centers of the cell, respond favorably to fat-based fuel, producing energy with less oxidative stress compared to constant glucose overload. Reduced oxidative stress means less DNA damage and fewer inflammatory byproducts that can disrupt cellular communication. There is also an important neurological dimension, as the brain itself is largely composed of fat and relies on stable lipid intake to maintain membrane integrity and neurotransmitter balance. Improved brain signaling feeds back into metabolic regulation by stabilizing appetite control, stress response, and sleep quality, all of which influence fat storage and immune competence. Culturally, fats have been misunderstood and feared, leading to dietary patterns that replace them with refined carbohydrates and industrial oils that destabilize metabolism. Reintroducing natural, minimally processed fats restores a sense of nutritional coherence, aligning intake with biological expectation rather than dietary ideology. Over time, the body learns to trust fat as a reliable energy source. Reducing metabolic panic and shifting the internal environment toward efficiency, resilience, and calm regulation, where fat burning becomes natural. Inflammation recedes, and cellular behavior follows healthier, more orderly patterns when we introduce phytonutrients into the diet through bitter greens, deeply colored vegetables, berries, herbs, and spices. We are engaging in a subtle biological dialogue that strengthens the body rather than forcing it. These compounds evolved as protective chemicals in plants, and when consumed by humans, they act as gentle stress signals that activate internal defense systems rather than overwhelming them. This concept is known as adaptive stress, where small, manageable challenges stimulate resilience at the cellular level. Phytonutrients interact with genetic pathways that regulate detoxification enzymes, antioxidant production, and DNA repair mechanisms, essentially reminding cells how to protect themselves in a demanding environment. Instead of directly killing abnormal cells, these compounds improve the body's ability to identify what is damaged, repair what can be saved, and remove what no longer functions properly. Cruciferous vegetables, for example, stimulate enzymes in the liver that help neutralize and eliminate harmful metabolic byproducts before they can damage cellular DNA. Berries and colorful plants provide polyphenols that reduce oxidative stress, lowering the background damage that accumulates silently over time and contributes to aging, metabolic dysfunction, and uncontrolled cellular behavior. What makes phytonutrients particularly powerful is their selectivity. Healthy cells respond by strengthening their protective systems, while stressed or abnormal cells already operating at the edge of survival are less able to adapt. This creates an internal environment that favors order and balance without the collateral damage associated with aggressive interventions. Inflammation, which often acts as fertile ground for fat accumulation and cellular instability, is gently suppressed as these compounds downregulate inflammatory signaling molecules. As inflammation subsides, insulin sensitivity improves, mitochondrial efficiency increases, and immune cells regain clarity in distinguishing between self and threat. There is also a hormonal dimension, as phytonutrients influence estrogen metabolism and other growth-related signals, helping prevent excessive stimulation of pathways linked to abnormal cell proliferation. Beyond chemistry, bitterness and strong flavors play a sensory role in appetite regulation, stimulating digestive enzymes and encouraging slower, more mindful eating patterns that support metabolic stability. Spices such as turmeric, ginger, garlic, and cinnamon contribute not only flavor, but molecular signals that enhance circulation, improve glucose handling, and support immune vigilance. Over time, regular exposure to these compounds reshapes gene expression in ways that favor longevity and metabolic efficiency, a process that unfolds quietly without dramatic sensations. The body becomes less reactive and more discerning, responding to challenges with precision rather than chronic alarm. This approach reflects a broader biological truth that strength often emerges not from force, but from repeated exposure to manageable challenges that refine systems instead of overwhelming them. By embracing phytonutrient-rich foods, we align with this principle, allowing plants to act as teachers rather than medicines, guiding the body toward an internal landscape where repair is prioritized, inflammation is restrained, fat metabolism is regulated, and cellular behavior remains disciplined and coherent over time. When adequate, clean protein is paired with regular muscle activity, the body receives one of the clearest signals of safety, strength, and long-term survival it can recognize. Protein supplies the amino acids required to repair tissue, synthesize enzymes, and maintain immune defenses, but its true power emerges when it is directed by movement rather than passively consumed. Muscle contraction acts as a metabolic command center, telling the body where those amino acids should go and how energy should be allocated. Without movement, protein can be misdirected toward storage or inefficient pathways. But when muscles are regularly engaged, nutrients are pulled into productive use, reinforcing lean tissue and metabolic efficiency. Skeletal muscle is not merely a structure for movement. It is an endocrine organ that releases signaling molecules called mitochondria, which influence inflammation, insulin sensitivity, and immune regulation throughout the body. As muscle mass is preserved or built, glucose uptake improves independently of insulin, lowering circulating blood sugar and reducing the hormonal pressure that drives fat storage. This shift is critical because chronically elevated insulin and glucose create an internal environment that favors metabolic dysfunction and abnormal cellular behavior. Protein also increases thermogenesis, meaning the body expends more energy digesting and assimilating it compared to carbohydrates or fats, subtly supporting fat loss without triggering stress responses. At the cellular level, adequate protein availability supports proper cell cycle control and repair mechanisms, ensuring that damaged cells are more likely to be corrected or removed rather than allowed to persist in a weakened state. Muscle activity further enhances mitochondrial density and function, increasing the body's capacity to burn fat efficiently and reducing oxidative stress. This improved energy handling lowers the production of inflammatory byproducts, interfere with immune surveillance and tissue repair. There is also a profound neurological effect, as resistance and functional movement improve brain-derived signaling that enhances mood, cognition, and stress resilience. Lower stress hormones reduce visceral fat accumulation and suppress inflammatory pathways linked to metabolic disease. Importantly, this strategy reframes aging itself, shifting the narrative from inevitable decline to maintained function. Preserving muscle sends a biological message that the body is still needed, still engaged with its environment, and worth maintaining. This message influences hormonal patterns, immune vigilance, and even appetite regulation, aligning them toward maintenance rather than breakdown. Protein quality matters as well, because clean sources provide essential amino acids without the inflammatory burden of excessive processing, allowing repair to occur without metabolic cost. Over time, the combination of protein and movement creates a virtuous cycle in which strength supports metabolism, metabolism supports immune clarity, and immune clarity supports cellular order. Fat becomes fuel rather than burden, growth signals become disciplined rather than chaotic, and the body operates with a quiet confidence rooted in functional capacity rather than constant compensation.